All right, so what is Baybayin? Baybayin is a pre-Spanish writing script. It's used in the northern Philippine archipelago. Specifically, it is used in the ancestral areas of the Taga-Ilog, or what we call the Tagalog people. The phrase Baybay means seashore. What that has to do with the writing system itself, I have no idea, honestly. It's kind of like a tidbit lost to history. But a lot of people just feels like Baybayin means to write now as a translated form, but it really means seashore. The writing form is known by other names based on regional variations among other groups. So the Visayan call this writing form Badlit. The Ilocanos call it Gordita. Basahan, it's known in Bicolano. All of these different forms of the writing system are known as Suyat or Sulat or Surat. And they all mean writing. It's all a broad general term for this very specific writing form in the archipelago. Baybayin is also a Brahmic script. So it's actually based off of Indian writing systems. It came in through the islands during a period of heavy Indianization of South Asia and Southeast Asia, including the Philippine Islands. It was the period in history where Hinduism and Buddhism had traveled. And it originally came directly to the islands from Sulawesi, which is one of the major islands in Indonesia, which it was a form of Jawi script. So yeah, this is all based on South Asian writing forms. Next slide, please. So this is the oldest dated artifact that was found in the Philippines, meaning like the document itself, it says the time period it's from. It's from 900 AD or CE. It's known as the Laguna copperplate. It's a 7-inch by 11-inch metal sheet. All of the Baybayin written on it, it's an antiquated version of it, and it was engraved. So someone took like a sharp tool and slowly hammered all of this information on it. The document itself describes how an intergenerational debt to a noble or a royal was fully cleared and acquitted for one of their lower class servants or slaves and their descendants. So it's basically like, you owed us so much money that the debt was going to last your descendants, but that was cleared. You worked it all off, so good job on that. We're good. This is our receipt, I guess. The cool thing about the Laguna copperplate is there are a whole bunch of names of titles and lands on it, especially within the Tondo Empire, which is in the area of like central Luzon, so like Manila, a lot of like Quezon province, I think Pampanga, like a lot of that area was known as the Tondo Empire around 900 AD. But yeah, they have a lot of things listed on there, like the name of the servant and the name of like his social class on the hierarchy, the name of like the noble or royal, like their title, like what homeland they originally are. So like of this empire in this like village in this state during this emperor's reign or this datu's reign, like for some reason it is like super descriptive of like names and stuff. So historians really love this little thing. And it also like helps historians learn that like not only were cultures and societies in the islands at this time not isolated, they were like very much dealing with foreign trade and foreign politics. So it's like a really important document for Filipino history. And yeah, it is a pretty antiquated form of Baybayin. So a lot of these like forms in the script are not really used, but a couple forms are still used, and they're pretty legible to modern Baybayin writers, especially the vowels. So like there are definitely examples that I can see, like E's, A's, and the B character, the ba, like it looks like a little bean with a line either above or below it. So this is somewhat legible, but it's still pretty like, it's like an ancient rune to read. Okay, next slide. All right, so this is a lot of what Baybayin is. So here are a couple like myths and misconceptions and kind of misled facts about what Baybayin is not. The big one is Baybayin is a pre-colonial writing system of the Philippines. I think it really is important these days to remember that the Philippines did not exist until 1898. Like that's a national name and a national origin. And to think that like all the different peoples of the islands had a really monolithic culture, it's misleading. So it's definitely a pre-colonial writing form that was found in the Philippines at that time, but it wasn't like the dominant one. Another misconception is a lot of people tend to call it alibata, especially people of like my parents' generation, the boomers. Like they'll be like, "Oh, you're talking about alibata?" Like, no. So that was a term that originated from a Filipino professor named Paul Versosa in 1914. He mistakenly said that the origin of Baybayin was from the Arabic alphabet. So he named it after the first two letters of the Arabic alphabet, Alifi and Bata. Because he noticed that the Arabic alphabet was being used in the southern Philippines in Moro territory on Maguindanao, and he saw Jawi. So he mistakenly believed that he saw this like progression or migration path of the form, but in the southern Philippines, in Moro territory, like they use Arabic alphabet, and it's distinct. It's a distinct use from the Suyat used that includes Baybayin. So it technically isn't Alibata because that refers to an alphabet. And the next myth is that Baybayin is a Filipino alphabet. Technically, Baybayin is not an alphabet. It's a syllabary. So we like, for a quick lesson, like alphabets utilize letter forms, and those stand in for simple units of sound called phonemes. So like A is a unit of sound, B is a unit of sound. But these are not letters. These all are symbols and characters. They stand in for compound sounds, which we call syllables. So every character in Baybayin actually is not like a K sound. It's a ka or a ko or a ki. So yeah, it is not an alphabet. A lot of people attribute the disuse of Baybayin and the real like loss of it to the Spanish kind of eradicating the use of Baybayin through colonization. If anything, the Spanish actually preserved it for us, and many of the documents that we use in 2020 to like even know how to write it and other forms of Suyat are thanks to the Spanish documenting things. Basically, what began happening was that the business practices that the Spanish were doing for legal documents or political documents contained so much Spanish and European language that Baybayin, was not written to record, that everyone just kind of used the Roman and Latin alphabet that you use for Spanish. So it just became a thing of it became more and more impractical for Filipinos who were literate to use in their daily lives, because they couldn't do business or handle politics in a Spanish colony. So it just fell out of practice through that. But as far as preservation or trying to take away our identities and stuff, like it's misleading. It's, if anything, the Spanish helped preserve this part of our identity and our culture for us. So thanks for that, colonizers. And there's one more, Georgie. If you go back. Thanks. Yeah, so Baybayin, yeah, it is not the only native writing system. As I mentioned, there is some Arabic alphabet used, especially in the South. So Baybayin is one of many different hand styles or lettering or character forms in Suyat. So now we can go to the next slide. Thanks. So this was a pretty popular graphic that was especially going around on social media a while ago. And the guys that I learned Baybayin from, like when they saw this, they were pretty pissed off at how misinforming this graphic was. It usually coincided with people sharing an article that explained how Baybayin is not the only writing system that the Filipinos used. And actually it was. These are not different writing systems. They're all different handwriting styles. So you can think of them as regional fonts. So while Baybayin is a very simple hand style that has a lot of like round movement in creating forms, like in Pampanga, in Kulitan, it is a lot sharper. You know, Haninuo, which isn't even a name of the writing form. It's just a form of Mangyan. It's a lot taller, but like if you look at most of these forms, like the top 8 forms especially, they all have the same, all the characters have the same shapes. You can all see the P, the Li, the P, and the No. And then down there, like Jawi, Kirim, those are Arabic alphabet forms. So yeah, these are not different writing systems. They all correspond to the same characters. It's just some people favor fancy, some people favor simple, some round, some blockish, but they are all the same characters, and they're not different writing forms. They're just different styles of the same system. All right, you can go to the next slide. All right, so these are all of the basic Baybayin characters. It's a relatively simple script, as opposed to like the Roman alphabet, where there are 26 letters that all have different types of pronunciations, and sometimes those are even silent, and you can add things like umlauts and they change their pronunciation, and it takes a while to really understand. There are only 17 main characters in Baybayin. There's 3 vowels, and then there are 14 consonant characters, because they all begin with a consonant. So the hardest part is really just memorizing these. But once you do that, then you find out that writing them out becomes really easy. There's a couple like cool things you'll notice in like the basic Baybayin characters is that there's one for nga, nga, just because it is so commonplace in native Filipino languages that it has its own one. And one that's especially funny for me to deal with, since my name is Derrick, is that the ra and the da characters are the same exact thing. So that's because Ra's it wasn't very commonplace among native Filipino languages at the time that Suyat was being in heavy usage. So they just kind of compounded them to have like two different consonant symbols for the same, with using the same symbol. So that makes it like, that can make it really difficult, because that means that even if I spell my first name out correctly, you can read it different ways. All right, next slide. All right, so the KUDLITs are just markers that you put either above or below the character, and that will change the vowel sound at the end of the character sound. So this squiggly line ka symbol, if you put a marker below it, it will change the pronunciation of this form from ka, which is like the neutral standard unkudlited form, to a ko or ko sound. If you place your kudlit above the character, it will become a ki or ke pronunciation. And then these next two are what the Spanish contributed towards writing out Baybayin, and to try to find some way to integrate it into this with Spanish language, which are the Spanish crosses. So if you place a cross below the character, it will cancel out the vowel sounds. So you'll get just a hard K sound, like a k. There really is no difference between either of these crosses, either the upright or the X on its side, except that this upright cross is predominantly used in the middle of the word. So if I want to write out barcada, that this upright cross will be put on that K. The sideways K is typically placed at the end of the word. So it's kind of like an emphasis of this is the end of the word. And then this is an optional one, but this is a pretty modern contribution to writing out Baybayin. If you have a slash, single or double is acceptable. It's basically punctuation. So if you write out a sentence or statement, putting this at the end of your Baybayin, basically end of sentence. So it's kind of a nice thing to have, especially if you're writing out something a little longer. So these are the main markers and indentations that you incorporate into the other basic Baybayin forms. All right, so as I showed in that earlier picture, there are two different ways to really write out Baybayin. There's the pre-Spanish and the Spanish. So the pre-Spanish writing of Baybayin basically got rid of consonants, if there were any to begin with, at the end of the syllable. So I took my nickname Bundok, which means mountain, which is a native word. And before the Spanish came, it would have just been written out Bodo. And basically, if there was that N or K sound put out, it was inferred. So yeah, there's a lot of that people that hope to have more authenticity to writing things out still practice when they use Baybayin. So there are a couple like pieces of merchandise I've seen where everyone wants to do like the pre-colonial spell or writing out of the form, and they would say budo. But the Spanish found a way to make things a lot more accessible for European-based words and phrases, and names especially, because like a lot of names have just been, even that we feel are really Filipino, have just kind of been Spaniardized. So to write bundok out in the Spanish form of Baybayin, we would just put the N and the K in, but we would cancel out the vowel sounds out of them. So we would have a hard consonant at the end of the syllable. So it would be bundok. Yeah, so those are the two differences. Like as a personal preference, I do like writing out the whole thing. So I use the Spanish method. It especially helps out with a lot of Spanish words and names, especially like my first name. If I write it out, it would be really difficult for quite a few of our names to have to like be written out if we couldn't add syllable forms to show that there's a consonant at the end of the syllable. All right, next slide. All right, this is, if anyone does eskrima or arnis, Johnny Quinete is an actual escrimador, and I just liked his name to show a couple weird things that happen when you add different things to Baybayin. So the J sound, so Georgie should be paying attention to this, and Gino. You know, J is like a really compact, harsh letter sound. And for like a Filipino tongue, like a native Filipino tongue, you know, we wouldn't go jet, we'd go jet. So you would actually put in the D, cancel that out, and have it like smoothly transition into a yet, the yet form. So jet becomes jet. If we're gonna have a tilde on over an N, which is, you know, frequent in Spanish to make that enye, we would have the N, we would cancel out the vowel, so it's no longer na, and it would be nya or nye. And that's how you would put down enyes. So to write out Johnny Quinete would be Diani Ganyete. And that's how his name is written out in Baybayin. Next. All right, so for another weird European thing, these kind of digraphs that compact syllables and make more harsh sounds like ch or sh. So shiara. Yeah, we would just soften the sound into another consonant. So Chino for Chinese would become Sino. So it would almost be like a silent T, except it's a very, very subtle and nuanced pronunciation of that T. So it definitely would not be written out Sino. It would definitely stay Chinese. You wouldn't be asking who. And then for the TI, like satisfaction, or in this example, action, like we would not say action, we would say action. So it's weird because we have two consonants canceling out next to each other. It would be action, just like that. So knowing that Y form, that Y character is important if you have like things like these H digraphs. For other ones like the PH sound, like we don't say Filipinas, we say Pilipinas. So we would basically not have to deal with the H, just write it out using a P character. And then if we have the TH digraph, so like the, they, them, again, just cancel out that H, don't use it, and then we'll stay with a T form. So it will be like, I don't know, the thermometer. All right, next one. All right, so this is probably the most common mistake people do when they're writing out Baybayin. They are under the assumption that Baybayin is an alphabet and they just seek to write it out letter by letter. This does not say Derrick. This says the that is not how you write the name. Just to remember, this is not, Baybayin is not an alphabet. Suyat systems are not an alphabet. They are a syllabary, so you want to sound out your syllables. And then knowing that all the forms, all the character forms are written out and pronounced consonant vowel, you really want to look for those combinations of consonant vowel. So I wouldn't write my name out Derrick or Derrick, especially because then I'm just needlessly canceling out and adding an unnecessary character in. One rule that Christian Kabuai, who I'll explain who that is later, says is like, if it's too long, it's wrong. So if you can spell your name out with fewer characters, if you can write a word out with fewer characters, go with that one. So my first name would go Derrick, just with that. And as you can see, it's still confusing. It could be Derrick, it could be Reddick, it could be Dedick. It's confusing because they share the same character form. So next slide. That is why I don't really like writing out my first name. This is my signature. You'll see it on a couple of my things. It says D. Quevedo. Yeah, 4 characters, my whole name. So yeah, a couple quick things that you notice that like, my name is not pronounced Quevedo. I really Americanized the pronunciation of my name for the longest time just because no one knew how to spell it or pronounce it and didn't understand like, oh, it's a Q. I don't know how to say that. So I would just say it's Quevedo, and I was wrong, and I did my ancestors dirty like that. But actually pronouncing it the way you would spell it out in Baybayin, it has like a real strong ancestral connection for me. So it would be Quevedo, because like that QU digraph also, you would simplify it to a K sound. And also the V, we don't really have that V sound in native Filipino languages either. So it would become a B. So Di Quevedo. And if anyone wanted to know how to actually pronounce my last name, that's how it goes. So, so yeah, I think like it's just really interesting how this connection between the language and the writing form and knowing that about like my last name and how pronunciations can do a lot of things. It's a really cool interconnection, especially knowing that saying it Quevedo and not Quevedo differentiates a Filipino Quevedo from a Spanish Quevedo or a Latine Quevedo, because it's a common surname, a common Spanish last name. So if there is a Venezuelan person who I have met Venezuelan Quevedos, they're gonna say their name Quevedo, and I'm not. So that helps with that distinction of like, yeah, I know we have the same last name, but we're not related, guys. All right, so this is activity time for you guys. This is just an example of collecting everyone's name in the chat and then learning to write out their names, which is the main focus of all of our practice and exercises today. So I found a couple names of stereotypical Filipinos, I guess, that, according to me anyways. Couple cool things, like as you see in Alvin's name, like there's no V sound, I turned it into a B. The trina, so those 2 consonants next to each other, you cancel out the vowel out of that T, so it just connects into the R, so trina. And I added that, I just do that for aesthetic purposes to sometimes put that slash at the end of things. Yeah. Juliana, again, that J is becoming a D-Y combination of Juliana. Marco is pretty straightforward. It's just Mar, with the R canceling out since there's really no way around putting a consonant at the end of that syllable. Christina, Again, you have the Christina. You have to add that S at the end. And then Aria is a fairly simple one. So for further research, if you want to get more in depth into learning about Baybayin, either in practice or like its history and its historical context and stuff, these two guys, as far as like Filipino Americans especially, like I learned the basics of this system and especially the do's and the don'ts from them. Christian Cabuay and Lane Wilkin. Christian is an artist. He uses like the calligraphic quality of Baybayin to make his paintings. He writes, he has a couple books published. He gives lectures and seminars about Baybayin across the country. He's been to Baltimore. Yeah, he's on social media. He has like I think 3 different accounts. And he also sells merch, so you can get a couple cool things from him. I think he does personalized things. If you want like a shirt with your name on it or something, he'll do that. So Christian Cabuay is one source for learning. Another one who is like a really great source is Kuya Lane Wilkin. He is a really like academically respected expert on Baybayin. He's a mambabatok, so he practices like hand tapping tattoo art. This is a picture of him doing that. He's been studying not only pre-colonial and ancient Filipino art and culture, but also like Pacific Islander culture and that interconnectedness of like all of these artistic practices across the Austronesian world, like for well over 2 decades. So like he understands the interconnectedness of like hand tapping Filipino culture, like kalinga tattoos, with like poly tattoo culture, like what's happening in Polynesia, Hawaii, New Zealand, with Maori. So he's another really great source, especially if you want to get into like the historical side of the history of Baybayin and Suyat, because he's written about it and he knows about it. He similarly gives lectures and workshops and stuff. Probably not now because we're in a pandemic, but these two guys, and they've totally collaborated on stuff together. Like they are, I'd say like the foremost experts, especially in the US, about like Baybayin practices and histories. So if you want to get more into that, like they are both accessible on social media. They're on Facebook and they're on Instagram, and they have books. I know that I know Christian's is sold out on his website, but like you can get his like basic Baybayin book on Amazon still, I think. Yeah, Lane's books are still on Amazon as well. And if you ever consider getting like the full body hand tattoo, yeah, I would look up Lane. So yeah, that comes to the end of our workshop learning talk on Baybayin as a practice.